Mic check, mic check. First and foremost, give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son Hamashiach, who some call Yahweh, Yeshua, Yahushua. We most know as Jesus Christ. Shouts out again to Abu. He dropped a couple of classics this week. This one here is on Ahrayahla's Evolution on One West Bahasham. Okay, One West Bahasham. Let me go ahead and let this thing play. Bahasham is in the name, so they say.
A bit raw, a bit sloppy. I hope you forgive me for that. I just wanted to quickly rush through something and show something interesting and document, like I said. And so it'll revolve around this thread that you see on your screen. It's a public Facebook thread. I'll link to it in the description. And it started last night, the late hours.
Yeah, you shouts out to Abu.
May. By the way, the author of this thread, I don't know much about him or his current beliefs. My impression is that he might be a former or erstwhile student of Quanah Lawa. I'm not entirely certain about that. I could be wrong about that. Again, like I said, I don't know what he currently believes, but his current beliefs are not entirely relevant to this discussion. But I bring that up just to say that this is a gentleman who is familiar with the Hebrew Israelite spectrum, has some proximity to it, and his familiarity with it is going to show in this post. So this is what he writes in his caption. He says, same mistake since the late 1900s is crazy. Quote, in the name, end quote, is Beshem. Now, he might pronounce that Basham, but whatever the case, those Phoenician characters or quote-unquote Paleo-Hebrew characters are Beit Shin Mem. And then he continues, you can't find Bahasham anywhere in Scripture. And then he shows the Hebrew text of Deuteronomy.
And it's that dawn. You know. There's three letters there, B, S, M, B, S, M, and we trying to get how we got Bahasham. So this word here, this letter here, this B, giving us Baha, and then we getting S with this SM, we getting Sham, but you getting Baha, from this one letter. And that's why they kind of saying that, hey, you know what? This need to get checked.
Deuteronomy 18:7 to show how in the name of, how a construction which would be translated in the name of actually appears in that text. Now, to explain what's going on here, the One West subset of the Hebrew Israelite spectrum has popularized saying Ba-ha-sham for in the name of. Like, for example, they'll say Bahasham Yahweh Shai. That's their way of saying in the name of Jesus, right? And as a number of people, including myself and Matzilel, Marbei, and others have pointed out for years, when One Westers say Bahasham, they're thinking in English, right? They're creating a construction that doesn't exist in Hebrew and certainly doesn't exist in the Hebrew Bible. And this gentleman was pointing that out as well and noting that for decades, the people using this don't seem to have ever corrected themselves or even come to the realization that the construction they're using is found nowhere in the Bible. But while he's absolutely correct, I wanted to get into the comment section because there's some interesting details therein. So going into the comment section, first there's this gentleman. He writes, the ha just means the. And so I responded, I said, the point that Joshua, i.e.
in this, it was Brother Shabar. And I didn't, I know about some dialogues when somebody's trying to correct him on this Hebrew, and that he may need to redirect. All right, he may need to redirect because these folk don't know what they talking about. He has a strong interest in learning the language and trying to get other people to learn the language, like I said. But you have a Dunning-Kruger effect. We start knowing a little something, and we think we can go out here and teach and realize, that you don't know much. You don't know what you're talking about. A lot of people sound good in this community. I used to go out, man, people be on the street corner and be like, man, well, why y'all Israelite, why y'all ain't speaking Hebrew? I go out there, Bereshit bara Elohim, and sound like I know, but I just memorized the first verse in Genesis. I just memorized the first verse. Then I say, see, did you understand what I just said? No, I didn't understand. See, that's why we out here talking like this, but we speak Hebrew. Just lying. You don't speak no darn Hebrew. You just listen to these people, and we can't be honest about that. That ain't his Yahweh shit. You don't know that. Didn't nobody teach you that. They just told you. They didn't parse that out. They didn't give you sentence structure what he about to go into. He didn't tell you it's a VSO or OVS or OSO. He didn't tell you what kind of structures that language is in. And everybody who done got a college prep diploma, I know back in my days, to get a college prep diploma, you had to take a foreign language for 2 years. I ended up taking German, and you know that it's not everybody language is backwards. But it's really English that's backwards. That's why English is a hard language to learn. We don't know that because it's our first language. But languages aren't structured the same way. The verb ain't in the same place. The object ain't in the same place. The subject ain't in the same place. And that's why a lot of foreigners be sounding crazy to us, because they be saying it in their language and saying the English words in the structure, in the order that we say it that they say it in their language, and vice versa. We're saying in the name like we say it in English, You putting that same sentence structure, and you're just applying what you think the Hebrew says, and then you placing it in the English order is what he's explaining. Which he's explained,
The ha just means the, and so I responded. I said the point that Joshua, i.e. the author of the thread, is alluding to is that One West was thinking in English when they came up with Bahasham, followed by the Tetragrammaton, a construction found nowhere in the scripture. It seemed natural to One West leadership because the definite article is included in English, but Semitic languages don't work that way. For example, so too in Syriac and Arabic, the respective definite article is not put on the word for name when that word is in a construct state relationship with a proper noun. And then I give the example of Bismillah, right? So, you always hear Muslims say in Arabic, in the name of God, Bismillah. In that construction, you have the preposition. It's basically the same sort of construction. You have the preposition, then you have the word for name, and then you have the word for God. And the definite article does not appear on the word for name, yet this would nonetheless properly be rendered in English as in the name of God, right? So the definite article is explicit in English, but it's not found in the Arabic text that's being translated. And that's the point there. The same is the case with Syriac with, you might, when they do the triadic formula, Beshem, Ba, Wa, Bra. However, as a bit of a disclaimer, I will say that I have seen it appear in certain rabbinic Aramaic texts, certain Targums. So there is that. But nonetheless, in Syriac and certainly in Arabic, this sort of construction where you don't have the definite article explicit is also found. So this is a phenomenon across multiple Semitic languages, right? Not just Biblical Hebrew. But whatever the case, let's continue on. This is what I wanted to focus on here, this subthread here by a gentleman called the Mighty Trooper. And he writes, a preposition meaning in, and then he puts the bet with a noun, right, meaning a name, Shem, Bahasham, right? So he's trying to explain what Bahasham means, right? And he's trying to explain it just means in the name. So I responded to that as well. I said the Mighty Trooper, he, i.e. Joshua.
And see, everybody's trying to get up and show what knowledge, but they don't know nothing. Everybody's getting up trying to show that they know what they talk, but you don't. And a lot, even like a Divine Prospect and a Zion Lex, who, Zion Lex, he actually teaches the language. And he sounds great to us. Divine Prospect sounds like a scholastic genius to us because we don't know. We don't know the text. We can't speak it. I even thought I had that book somewhere around me. Oh, here we go. I bought this book because of Divine Prospect. He was like, man, you want to learn? But I don't know, biblical Hebrew. Keep up your biblical Hebrew in 2 minutes. I don't swipe through here, man. You try to do 2 minutes. I can recognize letters, but I can't speak no darn Hebrew. And a lot of brothers will say they can speak it and then sound, like I said, it sounds good when there's nobody there that really speaks it. When somebody there that comes along and they can really speak it and they can really go through it, brothers be sounding like they don't know what the word they talking about, man. They, had to constantly get these things. I remember when I was first coming in, so like I said, some of the first people I was gathering with were Old Testament only. And it was one brother that came in. It was the brother that I knew, and we was gathering at his house. He seemed like he could speak it, and I would he said, man, y'all might start some classes too. And I was like, well, I want to come, I want to come learn. And but then his rabbi came down from New York, and he's from the commandment keepers. And so he used to give us stories and stuff, try to tell us how things were, da 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 da. But he was from the commandment keepers. I haven't seen him on certain pictures and stuff. Some of those old black and white pictures. But anyway, he could, once he got out there and he was hearing him read, he had to constantly correct them. And then it sounded like, well, bro, you don't really know what you talking about. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that to say that some of these people, they get in, they sound good until they don't, until they see somebody that really. Last example, GOCC leader, I forget his name, so apologies. And I always used to wonder about that, the Shalakia. I used to think that was like biblical shy. I'm like, how did they get the Shalakia out of not biblical shy? I forget. I think the biblical shy is a excuse. I think that's the Lashawan too. But I used to wonder for that word. It's a different word. It's way different than other Hebrew. Just trying to wonder how did they come up with that. But anyway, that brother from GOCC, he was told James White, he was challenging the apologist Dr. James White, and he said, hey man, he said, man, you got to go to the Strong's, you got to know the Hebrew. And then James White said, man, I teach Hebrew. You got to go to no Strong's. I know what that Hebrew say. And that should have been a point. That should have been a shift for all of us, but it wasn't. That was a very viral moment. And it was embarrassing for us. But he didn't even challenge James White. I ain't never seen him speak no Hebrew. He didn't even challenge him. But it was such a crazy statement. He didn't even, he didn't even want to deal with it. So, because he knew he didn't speak it. He couldn't tell if it was right or wrong anyway. But anyway.
Well, the author of the thread, he's aware of the elements in the construction. He was touching on how in biblical Hebrew, the definite article, the, ha, is not included in the relevant construction, right? And so the mighty trooper responded to me. He said the be or the bet, aka the preposition, absorbs ha when attached to a noun in the Yiddish Hebrew. So instead of in the name, right, Beit Hashem, it becomes Beshem, right? In names. So he's trying to say that this practice of not including the he in this construction,
Yiddish,
not explicitly including the definite article, is somehow a feature of Yiddish, right? That biblical Hebrew shouldn't properly have that. Rather, if you see it in a Hebrew text, that's just Yiddish. That's what he's trying to say, right?
And if you that guy, you can do that, man, but you gotta be that guy, man. You have to be. Who speaks this stuff fluent? We ain't got nobody in the community. And I know them Old Testaments do. I know the Old Testament onlys. That House of Shema, I want to say their name is. I know they do. I know they have people in there that speaking fluently. Also, I know the Nuwabians. There are some Nuwabians that speak it fluently. Actually, that brother Mark Lamont, and definitely them the Damona Israelites. Like, that's who should be speaking. You shouldn't be speaking here with no Lashawan. You shouldn't be speaking about no Hebrew. If we want to learn the Hebrew, we need them Damona Israelites to teach us Hebrew, man. Teach us biblical Hebrew. Teach us the sentence structure. They were born speaking it. May not biblical, but it'll be a much easier transition for them. because they understand the grammar.
Right? So I responded. I said, what Joshua is trying to note in his post is that the phenomenon is also the case in biblical Hebrew, i.e., it is not merely a phenomenon in modern Hebrew, which you refer to as quote unquote Yiddish Hebrew. Ba Hasham is not found anywhere in the biblical text. Anglophone Hebrew Israelites arrive at the construction because they are thinking in English. So, skipping over a few of these, then, to my surprise, there was a reply from Ahrayahla, who's a former member of Sakari. And I found this interesting because this is what he writes to that guy, the Mighty Trooper. He says, you're using English.
Now, if you don't know Ahrayahla is the brother who, brought all this stuff out on Guerrilla Hebrew, but he also has a Bible that he changed the names and put some Hebrew in there and so forth. But I also remember Guerrilla Hebrew saying, well, I don't know the Lashawan like that. I don't know the Hebrew like that. My Hebrew guy is Ahrayahla. And we've learned that Ahrayahla only been in this thing 6-7 years. But he's the Hebrew guy. He's your Hebrew guy. And when I seen a discussion, on the Lashawan Kodash between this lead, a couple leaderships on Clubhouse. I think I put the video up. I think it's called like What Divine Prospect Says About the Lashawan Kodash or something like that. All of these folks were kind of in agreement with they kind of yielded to Divine Prospect. And now I kind of see why, because Ahrayahla is kind of saying like, man, we don't know what the word we talking about. Israelites do not know nothing about no darn Hebrew because they're sitting up here just writing this thing out like English. You know how crazy you look, and you're sitting up here. Some brothers they have some prayers and stuff that these folks done wrote out for them directly in English, and they out here quoting this Lashawan in some of these prayers, and you out here looking like a darn fool. Looking like a darn fool. The Lord's Prayer in the Lashawan, you done turn to the east and all this, and you just saying jibber jabber. And you gotta admit that. Now I can admit that, man. I'm out here just teaching some foolishness. You don't know no darn Hebrew. You just took what these folks told you. I said it today. But I knew it was foolish at this point because I already seen this video. But brothers is into it. I just let brothers go with it. But then I look back at how many brothers I done told that that's what it was and that's his name and all of that stuff. Nah. And people that told me that, they don't know nothing about no Hebrew. And you gotta deal with that. You gotta eat that. Like you done sat here and told your mama, and it ain't his name, mama. His name Yahweh Hashem. Yakata. That's not it, brother. You don't know. You don't know sentence structure. You don't know nothing about no Hebrew. Stop saying it. Stop pretending. If we stop pretending, then we can go learn it. We can go do the work.
Syntax and applying it to Hebrew, which is a no-no. Much of what Hebrew Israelites say is not proper Hebrew for this very reason. Okay, I mean, round of applause for Ahrayahla that he's absolutely right there, and I'm surprised to see a apparent still proponent of Lashawan Kodash and a former member of Sakari say that, because it shows some growth, it shows some evolution. I wonder if members of Sakari or the other breakaway group from Sakari Genesis agree with Ahrayahla on this point, but points to Ahrayahla on that. However, the guy, the Mighty Trooper, he responds to both of us. He wrote to me, it's not found in there because it's in the Yiddish. It's wrote out different than it would be in the Paleo Hebrew, so he's trying to say.
You know what I'm saying, man? Brothers just be dealing with cognitive dishonest. They just can't handle it. Their brain can't deal with the truth. That you don't know what you're talking about. You just can't handle it.
say that even biblical Hebrew written in the Ashuri script and the now standard square or block characters is actually Yiddish, so he's confusing script with language, but that's a whole nother discussion. But that aside, then he responds to Ahrayahla Yashala, and he says, explain, Adawan, like explain, Lord, because Bahasham to English is in the name. Isn't that English syntax? It's sort of an ironic question. But Ahrayahla comes right back and he responds, the point that the brother was making is that Bahasham is not proper Hebrew. Hebrew is a language where you don't need 1,000 words to convey a point. Basham, as he demonstrated in our literature, the Torah, shows this. Brothers are employing or applying English syntax to the Hebrew as if English influenced Hebrew, which it did not. You can't apply the grammatical rules of one language to another. Okay, another fair point. And so then I don't understand this response, but the mighty trooper responds, Khan, just saying, yeah, I get you. So it isn't anywhere, nor does it need to be. The ha is added for proper Hebraic context. So even though they're thinking in English, he's saying it's added for proper context to denote in the name. Brothers isn't in the scriptures either, but we still say achiam. That's a strange statement. To pluralize speaking more to more than one person. My conclusion is nothing specifically has to be in the Hebrew to be properly translated to English and vice versa. Yahushai isn't in the scriptures either because the concordance doesn't have the proper name for him in it either. And then he claims that Yahushai is Yah equals he and Hawashai equals deliverance, salvation, redeem, whatever. We'll not get into that right now, but Ahrayahla responds. He says, you're not making sense. I agree on that point. He says, and you're demonstrating exactly what I'm talking about. Basham is sufficient. There is no need to add a ha to convey the phrase in the name. In the name in Hebrew is simply Basham, right? And I don't know what you're talking about, but Achiam is indeed in the scriptures. And then outside of this sub-thread, Ahrayahla left one other comment in which he wrote, I've been telling, well, he uses a word that I probably shouldn't repeat, especially, for the algorithm, might get a strike or something like that. So I'll say, guys. He goes, I've been telling guys to stop saying Bahasham for years. Hebrew Israelites don't know Hebrew.
Hebrew Israelites don't know Hebrew. Pray this thing was edifying. Y'all be blessed. Shalom.